It's 11:38 p.m. You're sitting in your car after work, engine already off, but you don't get out. You replay a conversation that never happened. What you should have said to your boss, the sentence you swallowed at dinner, the apology you practiced but never sent. Your lips don't move, yet the dialogue is loud and perfectly scripted inside your head. Maybe it happens in the shower, in line at Target, or while staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. You argue, explain, defend, confess, playing both roles with frightening accuracy. To the world, you look quiet. Inside, there is an entire theatre running without an audience. If this feels familiar, you're not strange, and you're not alone. What you're experiencing is called inner monologue, an invisible conversation the mind creates when real connection feels unsafe or unavailable. It can sound like comfort, like control, even like company, but it can also become a place where life is rehearsed instead of lived. In this video, we're going to step inside those secret conversations. Why does the mind build a second voice? When does it protect us? And when does it slowly isolate us? And most importantly, how do we turn that inner dialogue from a hiding place into a bridge back to the real world? Let's begin. Let's give this experience a real name. What you've been doing isn't simply overthinking. Psychologists call it inner monologue, the stream of silent speech your brain uses to organize thoughts, emotions, and memories. It's the voice that narrates your day, the invisible companion that comments on everything from a mistake at work to a stranger's tone at the grocery store. But not all inner speech is the same. There is self-talk, the practical voice that reminds you to buy milk or calms you before a presentation. There is rumination, where the mind circles the same wound like a finger touching a bruise. And then there is imaginative dialogue, full conversations you stage in advance, hoping to feel prepared for a world that often feels unpredictable. Your brain creates this second voice for a reason. Language is how humans make sense of chaos, and when no one is there to listen, the mind volunteers to do the job itself. It becomes both the speaker and the witness, the child asking for comfort and the adult offering it. Think about the last time you practiced a difficult sentence in the mirror, or argued with someone who wasn't in the room. You weren't being dramatic. You were trying to regulate emotion, to rehearse safety, to borrow a little courage before facing reality. Inner monologue is not a flaw. It's one of the most human things we do. The question isn't whether you have it. The question is how much of your life is being lived in that private theatre instead of the open, messy stage of the real world. So why does the mind create this second voice in the first place? The simplest answer is this: humans were never meant to regulate emotions alone. Our nervous systems are designed for co-regulation, feeling calm because another calm person is near. When that person isn't available, the brain improvises. It builds one out of words. The inner voice becomes a substitute witness. It listens when no one else does. It answers when the room is empty. For many people in America, raised to be independent, productive, not a burden, asking for emotional support can feel riskier than staying silent. So the mind learns a clever workaround. If connection is dangerous, I'll create connection inside. There's also a deeper layer: control. Real conversations are unpredictable. People interrupt, misunderstand, leave. But in your head, the script obeys you. You can rewrite the past, rehearse the future, pause the scene before it hurts too much. Inner dialogue gives the illusion that life can be managed the way a document can be edited. And then there is protection. For those who grew up with criticism, neglect, or unstable relationships, speaking openly may have once led to shame or punishment. The brain remembers. It decides quietly that it is safer to talk inward than outward. The second voice becomes a bodyguard standing between you and rejection. None of this is weakness. It is adaptation. The mind is doing what it believes will keep you emotionally alive. But adaptations have side effects. A voice built to comfort can slowly become a wall. A rehearsal meant to prepare you can replace the real performance. Understanding this doesn't mean you must silence that inner companion. It means recognizing what it truly is, a survival strategy wearing the costume of conversation. There is a strange tenderness in being both the one who speaks and the one who listens. Inside your head, no one interrupts you. No one rolls their eyes, checks their phone, or tells you you're overreacting. The inner voice waits patiently, like a friend who never gets tired. In that private space, you can finally say the sentences you've carried for years. You can admit you're scared, jealous, lonely, exhausted. You can cry without being seen. You can confess love without risking rejection. The dialogue becomes a soft room with the door gently closed, a place where the world's sharp edges can't reach you. That comfort is powerful. After a hard day, it can feel like coming home to someone who already understands the whole story. When you imagine explaining yourself to a kinder version of the person who hurt you, the body actually relaxes. The heart slows. For a moment, you feel witnessed. This is why the habit is so easy to love. Real people are complicated. They have moods and limits. The listener in your mind has infinite patience. It never misunderstands your tone. It never walks away. And in a culture that often rewards toughness and self-reliance, this inner companion can feel like the only safe relationship you're allowed to have. But comfort has a quiet price. The more perfect the listener becomes, the harder real humans start to feel. The warmer that inner room is, the colder the outside world can seem. What began as a shelter can slowly turn into the only place you believe you belong. At some point, the conversations in your head stop being comfort and start becoming rehearsals. You prepare speeches for moments that never arrive. You imagine confrontations you'll probably avoid. You practice being brave in a future version of yourself that somehow never shows up on time. You walk through entire scenes, what you'll say to your father at Thanksgiving, how you'll finally ask for a raise, the perfect response when someone asks why you've been distant. In your mind, the dialogue is flawless. You're calm, articulate, respected. The other person finally understands. The story ends with relief. Then real life enters, messy and unscripted. The words come out wrong. The other person interrupts. Courage dissolves the moment you see a real pair of eyes looking back at you. And suddenly the version of you in your head feels like a stranger you can't reach. This gap is where quiet grief begins. The more beautiful the inner rehearsal, the more disappointing reality can feel. Instead of preparing you for life, the dialogue becomes a parallel universe where things go the way you wish they would. You start visiting that universe more often because at least there you get to finish your sentences. Many people don't realize how much time they spend living in these invisible drafts of their lives. Hours disappear into imagined explanations, apologies, love stories that will never be sent. The mind mistakes rehearsal for movement, thinking you're doing something when you're only circling. And slowly, without noticing, you begin to practice a life that never actually happens. What begins as a refuge can slowly become a cage. The inner voice that once protected you starts setting invisible rules about how close other people are allowed to get. You notice small changes. You choose silence over conversation, imagination over risk, the safe script over the unpredictable truth. You tell yourself you'll talk later, tomorrow, next week, when you feel stronger. But the more you rely on the dialogue inside, the heavier real interaction begins to feel. People interrupt the story you've already written for them. They don't respond the way your inner listener does. And without meaning to, you start preferring the version of relationships that lives only in your head. Take Maya, a nurse in Seattle. After long shifts, she would sit in her car and rehearse telling her mother how lonely she felt after the divorce. In her mind, her mother finally listened, apologized, held her. For 3 years, that conversation happened almost every night. yet the real phone call never did. The imagined comfort became easier than the uncertain chance of being misunderstood. This is how isolation grows quietly. You stop sharing half-formed thoughts because the inner audience already applauded them. You avoid conflict because the argument has already been won in private. The world outside begins to feel like a stage where you forgot your lines. The cage doesn't lock all at once. It closes one ordinary day at a time, when you choose not to text, not to explain, not to try. And the most painful part is this. From the inside, it doesn't feel like a cage. It feels like control. It feels like peace. But peace that requires you to disappear is not peace at all. Beneath this habit is a quiet map of your history. Inner dialogue is not random. It grows from the way your nervous system learned to survive other people. Psychologists often find three roots tangled together: attachment, anxiety, and unmet emotional needs. If you grew up with caregivers who were unpredictable or distant, your brain learned early that speaking openly could lead to disappointment. So it built a safer alternative. Talk inward, not outward. This is common in people with anxious or avoidant attachment styles. The heart wants closeness, but the body remembers the risk. Social anxiety adds another layer. When being seen feels dangerous, the mind rehearses endlessly to reduce the chance of humiliation. Every imagined conversation becomes a form of armor, a way to step into the world without exposing the vulnerable self underneath. And then there is emotional neglect, often subtle and unintentional. When a child's feelings were ignored or minimized, they learned to become their own witness. The inner voice grew to fill a space that should have been held by someone else. What looks like talking to yourself is often a lifelong attempt to be finally heard. None of these roots are signs that something is broken in you. They are evidence that you adapted intelligently to the environment you were given. Your brain did not fail, it improvised. Understanding this psychology changes the story. The voice in your head is not an enemy. It is a message from earlier versions of you, still asking for connection in the only language they were taught. For all its comfort, inner dialogue has limits it can never cross. It can soothe you, but it cannot touch you. It can rehearse understanding, but it cannot replace being understood by a real nervous system sitting across from yours. The voice in your head can apologize 1,000 times, yet the wound with another person remains unchanged. It can imagine forgiveness, but it cannot feel the warmth of actual forgiveness arriving. Healing is not only a story we tell ourselves, it is a biological experience that happens between bodies, not inside a single mind. Inner conversations also cannot surprise you. They always speak with your vocabulary, your fears, your expectations. Real people bring something unpredictable, a perspective you didn't script, a kindness you didn't plan, sometimes even a conflict that helps you grow. Without that friction, the self slowly becomes an echo chamber. And perhaps the hardest truth is this: the inner listener never ages with you. It keeps you company, but it cannot build memories outside the walls of imagination. It cannot hold your hand in a hospital room, laugh at a terrible joke, or sit beside you in silence when words fail. This doesn't mean the dialogue is useless. It means it is incomplete. Like a life raft, it keeps you afloat, but it was never meant to be the shore. If you ask it to replace real connection, it will quietly shrink your world to the size of your thoughts. To live fully, something must eventually leave the mind and enter the messy, breathing space between two people. The goal isn't to silence your inner voice. It kept you alive. It deserves respect. The goal is to teach it a new job, to become a bridge back to people instead of a wall around you. Start small. When a conversation begins looping in your head, try turning it into words on paper. Writing slows the mind and moves the dialogue from an invisible circle to something you can actually see. Many people discover that once the thoughts leave the body, they lose their power to trap it. Second, share just 30% of what you rehearse. Not everything, only a manageable piece. Instead of delivering the perfect speech, try one honest sentence. I've been having a hard time lately. Real connection grows from fragments, not performances. Third, invite another nervous system into the process. Choose one safe person, a friend, partner, therapist, and let them respond in ways you didn't script. It may feel awkward, even disappointing at first. That discomfort is not failure, it is the texture of reality. And finally, practice dialogue rather than monologue. Ask questions you don't already know the answer to. Leave space for surprise. The world will not follow your script, and that is exactly where healing lives. Your inner voice can remain a companion, but it doesn't have to be the only witness of your life. Step by step, you can teach it to open doors instead of closing them. You don't have to carry both roles forever, the speaker and the witness, the child and the comforter, the one who hurts and the one who explains. At some point, you are allowed to put one of those seats back into the world where it belongs. Imagine this. Instead of another midnight rehearsal, you send a real message. Instead of arguing with a ghost, you let a living voice answer. The conversation may be imperfect, even messy, but it will be real. And real things breathe, change, heal. Your inner dialogue saved you when connection felt unsafe. Honor that, but don't let it become the ceiling of your life. There are people who can listen without a script, who can surprise you with kindness you never imagined. If this story felt familiar, you're not alone in that quiet theatre. Many of us have been talking to ourselves for years, waiting to be heard. Maybe today can be the day one sentence steps out of your head and into the world. If this video spoke to you, consider subscribing to the channel so we can keep exploring the hidden rooms of the human mind together. And I'd love to hear from you. What do your inner conversations sound like, and when did they begin? Leave a comment below. Someone out there might read your words and finally feel less alone. Thank you for watching.